Okay. Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to the September meeting of the League of Women Voters, Manatee County Natural Resources Action Team meeting. I'm Randy Miller, the chair of the team. This meeting is open to all, and if you're not a member of the league, you certainly are welcome to go to our website at lwvmanatee.org, where there's a link giving you the opportunity to join. Today's program is entitled Environmental Justice in Manatee County, Tallevast Toxic Groundwater. And we welcome Laura Ward, Wanda Washington, co-executive directors of Focus, and their Focus's attorney, Jeanne Zokovitch. Focus, which stands for Family-Oriented Community United Strong, originally formed in the 1990s as an unincorporated community group, then became a Florida nonprofit in 2003 and later a 501c3 nonprofit. Its mission is to protect the Tallevast community and its legacy. Tallevast is an unincorporated part of Manatee County, just north of Sarasota Airport. It has a board of directors mostly composed of affected residents or former residents. For its first 10 years, it was operated fully by volunteers, but as the extent of contamination became known, it became clear that staff was needed. So Laura Ward and Wanda Washington, who are on the call, are founding board members of Focus who became co-executive directors in 2014, and you continue to serve in this role. They're both members of the original founding families, and both sacrificed their established professional careers to serve the Tallevast community. Their attorney, Jeanne Zokovitch, has worked with Focus in the Tallevast community for more than 20 years. She was introduced to the issues in Tallevast while advocating for community notice to contaminated communities in the Florida legislature. At this time, she worked for a regional environmental group. After several years, Ms. Zokovitch became an academic, took an academic career, continuing to work with Focus first through an environmental law clinic she founded and then through special projects and pro bono work as a doctoral professor. In 2019, after reviewing the 5th annual report on the cleanup, Focus reached out to Ms. Zokovitch and convinced her to return to Florida and again work with them more fully on the issues. We ask that you put your questions that may come up during the meeting into chat, where they'll be reviewed by a league member, and then we will pose them to the speakers at the conclusion of their presentation. So with that, Jeanne, Laura, and Wanda, I turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Randy. We appreciate the league having us here. We welcome the opportunity to get people more involved with what's happening in Tallevast, because although we should be making significant progress in the community, instead, Lockheed has been not near as effective as they claim that they would be with cleaning up the contamination. And with long-term contamination comes other challenges. So Focus definitely has to be engaged for the long haul to make sure that the community is safe and continues to be present in Manatee County. As Randy said, my name is Jeanne Zokovitch. I'm an attorney who's worked with Focus for more than 20 years in a variety of capacities. And Laura and Wanda have asked me to run through a PowerPoint for you guys first and show you a brief video clip that was done by an investigative journalist recently, and then to jump into questions discussion. The truth is there's so much to talk about with Tallevast that they really wanted to allow your guys' questions to guide the discussion, to focus on what aspects of Focus, the community, the issues they're working on are most interesting to you guys. So with me to handle this today as the panel are both Laura Ward and Wanda Washington. As Randy said, they're the co-executive directors of Focus. Laura also sits on the Brownfields Resource Advisory Board, which we'll talk about in the PowerPoint. So just a brief agenda, we're looking at running through a PowerPoint that we presented recently at the Florida Brownfields Association conference, which was in Palmetto last week. It was prepared by which is an environmental consulting firm who works with Focus. And so most of what they had in that presentation was up to date and salient. So we asked if we could use those slides. In addition, we've added a few slides at the beginning and the end to kind of tailor it more towards the issues that we think that you guys would be interested in as Manatee County residents. We'll finish the PowerPoint with, actually towards the end of the PowerPoint, we'll do a quick video clip from Channel 10 in Tampa, where the investigative journalist Emerald Morrow did a story recently on the community, and then move into questions/discussions to figure out how, what parts of Tallevast story are you guys most interested in. So moving right ahead, why is it not? My PowerPoint is not allowing me. It says I'm sharing, so I don't know why it's not changing slides. Wait just a second. We troubleshot this twice and it was working. Oh, here we go. Okay. So this is just a slide that gives you a good overview of what Focus is currently working on. So every year they do an annual program plan. The mission, as Randy stated, remains throughout its duration to protecting the Tallevast community and its legacy. They currently have 5 active projects. One is called the Community Repository Project. This is essentially the fact that there is a library in the Focus office in Tallevast, and in that there are hundreds of booklets that channel the investigation at the American Beryllium Company from when the community first got engaged with the issue in the early 2000s all the way through this year. That library is accessible for anybody in the Tallevast community who wants to look at historic documents or current documents. We also have added a section there for the brownfields work that Focus has done the last couple of years. And there's also some historic health reports that were also done in Tallevast. The second project is the Community Education Project. Essentially, with protecting the Tallevast community and its legacy, Focus's main areas are environmental, health, and related quality of life. So they do provide education on those issues for ongoing activities like the American Beryllium Company cleanup, the Brownfields project that they're currently working on, but also kind of ancillary related issues as well. This education is done through a community newsletter. We also do community flyers and letters. We have an email list for the majority of houses in the community, which many of those things are disseminated that way. And then there's regular community meetings on different issues. Focus also hosts outside experts to come and talk to the community as part of the community education project as well. The third project, the Government and Private Party Accountability Project, is where Focus reviews and advocates for active issues in the community. So this includes the American Beryllium Company's cleanup by Lockheed Martin. It also includes the brownfields work that we're talking about, but it also can include the work that they're doing with Manatee County on various land use decisions, for instance, or more recently, the CDBG disaster relief grant program. So this is where Focus actually actively engages in advocacy on both specific and general needs that affect the Tallevast community. The revitalization project goes back to Tallevast roots and is working on trying to revitalize and redevelop the community in a mixed use way, as opposed to just lying down and allowing industry to take over this historic community. And the relocation project is a nod to the fact that many in the community have always desired community relocation based on both the extent of the contamination from ABC, as well as the duration for which the residents were exposed to the contamination. There's no active relocation project work being done, simply because to truly relocate the community, one would have to have everyone willing to go, and two, you'd have to have a massive amount of money to make sure that the community is relocated in a way that puts them in a place that they should have been but for the contamination. So this is just the title page from the Florida Brownfields Association. We wanted to just touch on this to give you a perspective. This talks about the brownfields work that they're doing in Tallevast. The panel was called Collaborative Planning for Revitalizing Tallevast through a partnership with the community, university, and EPA. Speaking on that panel was Laura, who's here with us today, Brenda, who is a former resident, who also is a member of the Brownfields Redevelopment Advisory Board, a member from EPA, a member from the University of South Florida who spearheaded the grant, and then one of our scientists from RES. Wanda and I were also present to support the panel, as was the investigative journalist that we're going to show the clip for at the end. And then it was moderated by our primary scientist who works both on ABC and the Brownfields work, which is Nadia Locke from RES. This is just a historic aerial photograph that essentially shows you what Tallevast looked like once upon a time, which was very underdeveloped or undeveloped land, very agrarian in nature. The history that we sent, that I know has in part been shared with you guys, talks about how the community was settled in the late 1800s, primarily by freed slaves, migrant workers, and other folks that migrated to this area to do turpentine work. This is a more current photograph of the community. It is, however, not a today view. What you see here is what the facility looked like for the decades that it was in operation. American Beryllium Company started operating in Tallevast in the 1950s and moved into this building in the early 60s and continued to operate, first being owned by Loral and then owned by Lockheed Martin into the 1990s. Lockheed first reported the contamination in the late 1990s when it was supposedly discovered for the first time as they tried to sell the property. The little inset photograph that you can see here shows what happened at the plant. You know, it doesn't look like your typical environmental justice factory. There's no big smokestacks. But it shows you that you still can have contamination and environmental justice issues, even in a building that may look innocuous. What they did here at American Beryllium Company is that they machined fine parts for weapons, including nuclear weapons. Luckily for the community, no nuclear contamination has been found, but industrial solvents and heavy metals have been the primary contaminants of concern that emanated off property. So the ABC contamination, like I said, was reported by Lockheed to the county and the state in the late 1990s. The community, however, was not told about it. Lockheed had done its investigation, had gotten an approved site assessment on the contamination, saying that there was soil and groundwater contamination, and that the extent of it was maybe 5 acres. They had already signed with the state an agreed cleanup plan to clean up that 5 acres of contamination without ever informing the community. But 2 actions took place in the early 2000s that basically led to the community stumbling upon the contamination. One was that Lockheed donated a trailer to a church, and the church, in trying to get the trailer permitted for use, was told that it was contaminated with heavy metals. Around the same time, Laura Ward saw someone putting a well in on her property. And when she asked what they were doing, they told her that they were putting in a well. And she, of course, told them she didn't order a well. And they said, no, ma'am, it's not a production well. It's a contamination monitoring well. And she said, what? And they said, you know, for the contamination at the ABC site. So putting those 2 things together, Laura and Wanda and other community leaders started demanding information from the county and the state. Not getting much information, they went on their own and started looking through files, and that's how they found out about the contamination. The county, Lockheed, and DEP decided to come into the community to assure them that the investigation had been completed, that they were safe, and that it was beginning active cleanup. When they came to do that community meeting, one of the statements that they made was that there was no exposure to residents because there was no active pathway for the contamination to reach them. They made this conclusion because they said that all the soil contamination was in fact on site. And they said that the groundwater would only be a problem if people were drinking from wells. And as they put it, since no one was using private wells, there was no concern. The problem was half of the community was still using private wells. The county, state, and Lockheed just dropped the ball in making the conclusion that there were no active wells in the community. So almost half of the community was still using it for drinking water. More were still using their former drinking water wells for irrigation, but also not a single person in Tallevast had access to public water system over wells until the late 1980s. So the contamination they indicated started as far back as the 60s, which mean even if you weren't being actively exposed, your family was likely exposed for multiple decades. So this caused them to reopen the investigation, and that resulted in multiple site assessments being turned down by the state of Florida as not being complete enough. Finally, they signed off on site investigation, told them to turn to cleanup development, and then 3 cleanup plans were rejected by the state as not being significant enough. But in 2009, on the 4th plan, the state approved the remedial action plan, the cleanup plan for the contamination. At the time that they approved it, this is what the plume looked like. So plume is a little bit of a misnomer in that you have multiple contaminants of concern in Tallevast, and you have multiple affected aquifer units. What this means is if you pick up an annual report on the contamination, this one map is a compilation of about a dozen maps. Every contaminant is mapped in each aquifer that it's present in, and then the footprints of those are overlaid with each other to create what's called the temporary point of compliance, which means within this boundary, at least one COC in at least one aquifer exceeds the cleanup levels. So this plume at the time of 2009 was almost 200 acres, despite the fact that the community was originally told that the contamination was only 5 acres. This is the 2024 Tallevast plume map. In the annual report that they do each year, they have to again put this in to show how big is the contamination. One of the first things that I want to draw to your attention is just to know that the plume is supposed to be shrinking, and instead it's still been growing in Tallevast. To help you better understand how much it's grown is if we look here on the map, on the top of the page, you see kind of a long building. There's actually like one building with a parking lot and then another long building behind it. So keep that in your mind as we flip back to the other slide. Similarly, on the south, you see this building back here to the, not on the east side of the airport runway that also has a big parking lot that has the yellow line going through it, this area right here. So use these as kind of your markers as we look back at the other slide. Nope, it's got to go backwards. There we go. So here is the facility that we were talking about before. The contamination, as you saw, now goes up through here. Similarly, here is the building down here, and the contamination now goes further down here. You also see eastward expansion. You have 2 new large buildings on the 2024 map. This is Amazon, and this is UNFI. When you look back at the 2009 plume, you would orient these as this being Amazon, And this being UNFI down here, again, you see how much the contamination has grown. So this just kind of gives you a zoomed in view of the residents in the community. We divide them into 4 quads for identification purposes. The entire community is about 82 residents, but there's about 115 parcels owned by individual residents, meaning either people who live in other houses or who are family members. Many of those did not get developed because of the contamination. And so there's a lot of vacant land still in residential ownership because of this current generation not coming back. To give you kind of geographic points, the north-south intersection of the quads is the CSX Railroad, and the east-west intersection is, of course, Tallevast Road. So the residential community extends really only about 2 to 3 blocks in any direction from Tallevast Road. This is the plant site right here from the contamination. So these are just some slides of different people in the community, including Lauren Wanda here, that show the residents who've been affected, the drill rigs that used to come in here. We wanted to give you some kind of, personal pictures to have an appreciation for the community. This slide shows advocacy that the community has done, that Focus has done for 20 years. So this first picture up on the left here is actually the beginning of a Brownfields Resource Advisory Board. You have Professor Wells here, Laura and Wanda, Brenda, one of the BRAB members, Vince, one of the BRAB members, Beverly, one of the BRAB members, as well as Paul Maxwell, the scientist from RES. So this was in the last year. This picture below is from the early 2000s, because you see a very young Bill Nelson here, Senator Bill Nelson, who was very engaged in helping the community in the early years. This picture here outside the governor's office was during the Jeb Bush administration, because as was mentioned in my biography, the Tallevast contamination resulted in required notification to residential property owners when contamination has emanated onto their property, and Jeb Bush signed that bill into law. This is another picture from a recent BRAB meeting, and this is the same picture we saw on the old site, which was one of the first community meetings with DEP and Lockheed regarding the contamination back in the early 2000s. So before I talk about this slide, I just want to real quickly tell you on the ABC contamination, the primary concerns are that the plume is still expanding, particularly as it relates to the southeast, but also to the north. We have reports from Lockheed documenting contamination further out in both the direction to the northwest and the southeast than ever before in the 20+ years that it's been being investigated. We believe that contamination in both of these areas actually exceeds Lockheed's ability to capture it, which means the contamination is going to continue to keep moving until Lockheed can pull it back to within their system. In addition, we believe that the residential community, which is that densely populated area right next to the site that's due south and southeast, is underreported in not the extent of the contamination, meaning the edges, but in which properties are affected by which contamination. And as much of this contamination is in the very shallow aquifers, even though there's no drinking water or irrigation wells being used, you still come in contact with the water table doing a lot of activity, which has forced the residents to kind of stand still because they knew their well once was contaminated, and Lockheed may or may not say contamination is beneath them now, but Lockheed has said that it doesn't warrant any restrictions on their property. But that conclusion is guided by Lockheed's desire to reduce any compensation it may owe them for loss of property rights, not based on actual data on their private property. So we talked a lot about how the community was tired of standing still. This is the Tallevast Community Vision Plan. Through brownfields, which is the concept that contaminated land or even land that's perceived as contamination, redevelopment efforts are thwarted because people are afraid of what they don't know. So through brownfields, you're able to get investigatory dollars to to take samples to actually make decisions about what contamination exists on individual private properties. You also can then see cleanup dollars for that contamination. And you can also then redevelop the property with tax credits towards community revitalization. So working with USF a couple of years ago, we got our first brownfields grant. It was through FDEP. It's a pass-through grant from EPA. It was a small technical consulting in which Professor Trent Green, who's the guy whose arms you see in the photo up here, came into the community and led the community in developing what they think the future vision of their community should look like. And that culminated in this plan in spring of 2024, which is the Planning to Stay, a long-term strategy for stability and growth. The crux of the plan is that Tallevast should be preserved. And in order to do that, it now sees a future as mixed use because there's been so much additional light industry brought into the area that the only way to assure that the residential portion of the community is preserved is to also start to market it for additional residential to make it a mixed use community, as well as what we call residential amenities, which would be things that directly benefit the community. Amazon does not directly benefit the community. It is fair to say that Amazon economically benefited the broader county, but based on the demographics in Tallevast, which is very mixed income, is a lot of elderly folks, but also a lot of high education professionals. Nobody from Tallevast works at Amazon. This is just another recent news article that talks about the brownfields in case you're interested in more. In the July-August 2025 of the Florida specifier, it talks about the brownfields project there. This is just the closing slide on the panel for the Brownfields Association. In case you are interested, it shows you all of those people I told you that talked on it, as well as their emails that can provide different perspectives on the brownfields work occurring in Tallevast. At this point, we'd like to play a short video clip for you from the investigative journalist Emerald Morrow. We do have it queued up here, but we have had problems, getting it to play in the video. We'll see if I can get it. If I can't get it, yep, I did. Excellent. I can't, there is a button here that I can't see because all of the, there.
Choose Winters and Yonker, and we will send an attorney to you for your auto accident. I'm Bill Winters.
Bear with us for the ad. We don't have any relationship with Mr. Winters or his firm. It's just an ad.
Free attorney consultation.
The eye doesn't see, and the nose can't smell the trouble in the water of Tallevast well. But as the years go by, the body keeps score. And though it may get weary, the spirit fights forevermore.
My name is Beatrice Ziffler. Irvin Smith.
My name is Sandra Otero. These are the names.
My name is Walter Bryant.
And these are the faces of a Manatee County community, small in number, big in heart. Welcome to Tallevast.
Not realizing that I was bathing in toxic stuff.
So this investigation got its start last year when I found out that researchers at the University of South Florida got a $500,000 grant from the EPA to study pollution in Tallevast. And that's a really small majority African-American community in unincorporated Manatee County. I went to a meeting in October 2024 that researchers had with residents, and it was then that I realized the gravity of the situation in Tallevast.
the PFAS contaminant plume.
I then found records that show contamination is now showing up in places it had never been detected.
Christian Wells, professor of anthropology, the community of Tallevast.
That's my brother, yeah.
Neighborhood,
Never go to a bank.
surprisingly
You're gonna be 18 years old in 2 months.
happy, upbeat, close, family-related people that have this really horrible past of drinking contaminated well water for a long time. And so you have a lot of people that have fallen ill with various types of cancers.
Irvin Smith. I was born and raised in Tallevast, Florida.
The water flowing from this tap hasn't always been safe.
I do, they should have said something.
For years, Smith worked at a now shuttered beryllium plant, exposed to toxic chemicals that troubled Tallevast for decades, where most people were on wells. Experts say these chemicals damage the nervous system, kidneys, and liver, as well as the immune system in developing fetuses.
Cancer rate I had is pretty high for one thing. I've lost a lot of family, sister, cancer. My dad, he passed away with cancer.
At one point, data showed that people who lived in Tallevast after 1962 for 10 or more years and used well water were more than 8 times more likely to develop cancer.
My mom, she had the cancer, and my brothers, all of us ended up with the prostate cancer.
Walter Bryant worked at the plant. So did Beatrice Ziegler's husband, who died after a bout with berylliosis.
Boy, I miss my husband. I had a good man. He was a good dude. I had a good husband. Yes, I miss him.
Lockheed Martin, which took over the plant property in 1996, notified the state of the contamination in 2000, but neither told the community. It was years before neighbors knew they'd been drinking contaminated well water.
Me personally, I always gonna go back to color our skin.
It was well known and kept from us.
Today, Tallevast residents are connected to city water and are no longer on wells, but the worries continue. Are you angry about what's happened here?
Yeah, it's hard,
Smith says he stopped gardening over fears of a tainted harvest.
Oh, boy.
He also lives steps away from more contamination concerns.
The oil in the car. Then they got all this stuff that they replaced and just left it sitting there in the back. No one seemed to care about Tallevast. I don't know why.
And about a block from those tracks is where our investigation picks back up.
Paul Maxwell, senior geologist.
Maxwell is one of the scientists working through that EPA grant. He's sampling monitoring wells his company installed at 15 Tallevast homes over the last few months. The testing doesn't replace what the state requires of Lockheed Martin, but it's an extra layer of knowledge and protection for this community.
Collecting some groundwater samples.
Groundwater that can also impact air quality.
There can be a horizontal or vertical spread of contamination in the groundwater. While that's all happening, there's vapors that the groundwater emits, essentially, which we call soil gas.
Through public records, I got a copy of Lockheed Martin's most recent report to the state. It shows an increase in groundwater chemicals at concentrations above the target cleanup level. It also shows the groundwater plume has started to spread. Records say the company has cleaned dozens of acres of pollution, but the plume covers more than 100 acres of land. An independent review of that report says there needs to be urgent action to stop further contamination. What's at risk if nobody stands up to help Tallevast?
People will continue to die of cancer and other illnesses caused by the contamination. And slowly, little by little, their historic residential community will get eaten up by commercial and industrial enterprises until there's nothing left.
My name is Sandra Otero, and I moved to Tallevast almost 3 years ago.
Unlike most of her neighbors who were born and raised in Tallevast,
It's the only plant that's lived.
Otero is new to the area.
The price point was in my price range.
but she didn't know about the contamination.
No one told me anything.
Otero is one of the 15 with monitoring wells on her property, testing for even more toxins on land that in some ways feels cursed.
I won't plant any vegetables or anything on this ground. And hardly anything lives on my plants. It's weird. They die. I don't even leave my dog out here too long because I'm afraid.
Also afraid of the financial impact.
When I sell my property, what's gonna happen? How much money am I gonna lose? Who's gonna buy it?
Lockheed Martin has not responded to my request to talk about this contamination. I'm also waiting to hear from the state, but at least one Manatee County commissioner said he will talk to me about this after he meets with the community. As for the faces of Tallevast, the push continues for clean water, air, and soil. In Tallevast, the town they call home.
So at this point, we'd like to open it up to questions and discussion. As I said, there's a lot going on in Tallevast. There's a lot that's been happening in Tallevast. And so we want to be sure that we're responsive to whatever questions or concerns you guys have.
All right. Thank you, Jeanne and Randy. We have a couple questions in chat, and we don't have a huge group here, so if anybody else has questions after we get through these couple, feel free just to pose them. First one, I think you touched on a little bit, Jeanne. Why has the contamination grown over to where Amazon is? And has Amazon, who can afford to do something to remedy the situation, have they done anything to remedy it? And are Amazon workers at risk in any way? And I guess that would pertain to any other companies that have moved into the area covered by the plume.
So I'll start with the why has it moved in that direction, and then I'll let Laura and Wanda talk about Amazon and the other companies that have come into Tallevast. First of all, groundwater movement is affected by, the hydrogeology beneath the community. And so there is some natural movement to the southeast. Tallevast actually is between two watersheds in Manatee County. So as small as it is, you have groundwater movement towards the bay on the west side of the community, and then to the southeast on the east side of the community. The other thing is that Lockheed was permitted to address the cleanup of the contamination only with a massive pump and treat system. So it's exactly what it sounds like. They're not using any of the sophisticated cleanup techniques that are done at a lot of sites. Instead, they're literally just extracting massive amounts of groundwater. And then they're running it through a treatment system on their plant. And then it's discharged mostly into the publicly owned treatment works, meaning your sewer. Or it is reintroduced in a couple of wetlands areas in the community through infiltration galleries. When they extract it, they do it through either extraction wells or through trenches. Because of the movement to the southeast, they built trenches on the property, which is part of the larger parcel that Amazon exists on. It was the former Schmid farm, and it was bought by SRQ 300 or Peak and rezoned in 2020. The trenches actually sit just to the southwest of Amazon, and the trenches actually help pull the contamination in that direction, which is somewhat counterintuitive because it's pulled towards the trenches from the pumping and then extracted and piped underground west back to the site. So that's a little bit that explains how the southeasternly movement is happening. As far as Amazon or UNFI or Manatee County with the bus depot, as far as their involvement with the community, I'll let Laura and Wanda speak about that.
There's not
Wanda, Laura?
I thought Wanda was about to speak. Well, to answer the question, no, Amazon has done nothing for the community. And we think that's kind of interesting because in all other communities that they have built their facilities in, they've done some kind of project with the community. So that's one of the things that we've been trying to get some answers as to why they aren't as interested in our community as they are in other communities.
We've tried to have communications with them, but we've not succeeded with that. We did have some communication with Peak, but once the sale went through, that ended it. All communications. Amazon refuses to talk to us.
And any other companies that you've tried to connect with in the area to see if they'd be of any help in any way?
No,
Any-
not at this point.
We
Okay.
talked with UNFI developers when they were being developed, but not about them assisting the community. Manatee County, as you know, has had a little bit of switch towards a little bit more community involvement in development decisions. I don't want to overstate that, but there is a movement in that direction. So they actually did meet with the community and talk with the community about their development, but have never showed an interest in actually providing assistance into the community.
And they
Well-
do know the community doesn't have any green space for our children to play on. And we also do not have a community center at this point. So children are basically just in their homes.
All right. Thanks. Couple of things on chat kind of tie together. Somebody asked whether you have had any collaboration with Minnesota 88 on this topic, and just coincidentally or not, Glenn Compton of Minnesota 88 is on the call and asked a question. Is there any notification to new renters or prospective buyers?
So on notifications, the Tallevast bill that was spearheaded by Representative Galvano, but which at the time he was, which I also got involved with and Senator Lawson got involved with, we made great efforts to try to include notice to anybody who was on the property. We included renters, we included employees, but the chemical and gas industry balked and convinced them to remove them from the legislation, or the legislation wouldn't get passed. Legally, as a landlord, if you rent to someone, Miss Otera is not a renter though, she's an owner, but legally as a landlord, you probably should be making some disclosures about the contamination. Lockheed and Manatee County and the state would say that there's no active exposures. So I think that some people just believe they don't have a duty to disclose it because there's no current risks as far as the state says. The same with real estate disclosures. There is an obligation to disclose things that might affect somebody's view of the property when you're selling, but whether or not that could be successfully enforced remains to be seen. With Miss Otera, Lauren, Wanda, did she build? She bought vacant property and built, or did she buy an existing house?
No,
It's a new home,
It's a
Yeah,
new home. I don't know if
but
she
she
built
didn't
it.
build it. No, it was for sale.
So a builder
A
spec'd it
contractor came in, yes.
and built it and then sold to her. So that's what happened. It
Yes.
wasn't like a former resident who tried to dupe Miss Otera into the property. It was a developer. There was another piece of the question. Oh, Minnesota 88. I did some work with Glenn. I'm sure he remembers, along with Brett Paben at Wild Law years ago on other issues. But other than education and communication on Tallevast issues, we've never worked directly on those issues. We do know that there's always more to do than what we can get done, hence the how you can help slide that we're leaving up here that we haven't talked about. And so we do know that we really do need more people to be engaged with Tallevast. And so we're looking for any opportunities to get people more engaged. With the league specifically, that first thing, the cooperative arrangement on Manatee County meetings, the county tends to notify us late or not at all when things are happening. And we know you guys have a really strong infrastructure for reviewing agendas and to making sure that somebody is monitoring the meetings. With the elderly small population in Tallevast, we have never been successful at having a regular presence on those things. So we'd love to talk to whoever's in charge of that to see if we can't create a natural conduit for you guys to kind of tip us off if you see something Tallevast related, and also to start educating you more when we know we are going to go to some of those meetings about how your members could also be helpful with that.
Yeah, we can work on that, Jeanne, for sure. Okay.
That would be great. As far as volunteers, as any small nonprofit, we need general volunteer. We also would really benefit from a variety of professional people who might be interested in helping the organization do things so that they don't have to spend money on some of those things. And then, as I was just talking about, when we are actively working on campaign activities where calls or letters or emails would be helpful, we'd love to have a pipeline for getting you guys involved with that. We also happen to have a vacant board seat. While most of the board is current or former residents, we do have a couple of positions on the board that are people that have a strong connection to the community that may not fit those other two criteria. We do have a vacant seat that will start in the fall of 2025. So if you know anyone or if you yourself are interested in potentially serving on the Focus board, we'd love for you to reach out and to apply for that position as we're considering applicants. We also have a Focus mailing email list. We don't use it very frequently, but we are trying to kind of dust it off and clean it up. So if you just want to be more regularly informed about what's going on in Tallevast, we'd love to put you on our Friends of Focus mailing list, which, like I said, is mostly emails, but occasionally letters. And then, like all nonprofits, donations are really important. Focus was successful actually at suing Lockheed Martin, not for the contamination itself, for breaching its contract where it promised to provide them with technical assistance funds. When they stopped paying, we brought a lawsuit for a breach of contract, and we were successful. We won a $3 million judgment in federal district court. And $3 million might sound like a lot, but the value of the contract was probably $20 million. The issue was that the commitment was supposed to last for the duration of the cleanup, which could be over 50 years. And the court found that the future damages of how long it would take to clean up were too speculative to be considered. While he told the jury to keep it limited to past due damages, the jury was smart enough to realize that that was an undercut, so they at least doubled that judgment. Lockheed, of course, threatened to appeal, and so Focus settled for less than that. They basically took about 2 years of consulting for funds during the height of the contamination and have now stretched it out for 12 years. But that money is almost gone. And as you can see, the work in Tallevast is not gone. In fact, the next 3 to 5 years are going to be critical for the community to continue to fight on all of these issues. So we welcome any donations. There's the place to mail a check. For online donations, we would have you email the regular email and we'll send you a link for that. Or if the league wants to take up a collection to directly donate to Focus, we'd love and appreciate that as well.
Okay, thanks, Jeanne. We've got a few more questions. We're going to try to wrap up by 6. We could probably go for a lot longer. But first of all, Ruth Lawler indicated, who's a real estate agent, that any owner or real estate agent is legally obligated to disclose any defects, whether I suspect whether they're the builder or just an owner. So whatever you can do with that. Also, what are some of the most recent developments or current events regarding outreach and mitigation. And I don't know, Bryce, you want, if you wanted to, Bryce, you could sort of explain a little further what you mean by that, if you're still on.
Sure. So I am actually an intern with the news station WSLR, and I was wondering if this might be an interesting thing to write a story about. And I didn't know if there was anything currently going on that might be cool for us to cover or write about.
Yeah, I think there's always something newsworthy in Tallevast. We haven't had as much luck with the media in recent years as we did during the height of the investigation. We did over the years do a number of stories over at SLR in Fogartyville and participated in a number of programs, but I would say it's been about 3 or 4 years since anyone from over there's done anything on Tallevast. Probably most notably, like I said, is that we're doing the active brownfields work. By the end of the year, we'll have information regarding the contamination found with that. The cleanup, like I said, has an annual plan that comes out every year that tells you the status of it. And then our scientists write back and tell them what's wrong with what they're doing. So that plan always hits us in October, and then our comments are usually filed within a month. So that's certainly probably something that would be very noteworthy at the time. But there's, because these issues are ongoing in the community, there's kind of always something. It just depends on the scope of which you want to do. So I just encourage you to email one of us and maybe to come talk to us and get a sense of what angle you might be interested in covering.
Okay, yeah, I definitely might reach out. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Bryce. We had a question posed. What are the actual contaminants that have been found?
Laura, Wanda, do you want to, or do you want me to?
You're on a roll. Go for it.
The industrial solvents are your typical TCE, PCE, DCE, 1,1-DCE, 1,1-DCA. They're all your typical industrial solvents. The other industrial solvent, though, is 1,4-dioxane, which is essentially related to dioxin. It's actually the one that has the greatest lateral spread. The TCEs, PCEs are more sinkers, so we find a lot of them deeper as well as shallow, whereas the 1,4-dioxane is found more at the ends of the plume that's moved the most. In addition, heavy metals, although there's no active cleanup of heavy metals in the groundwater, because they say that the heavy metals in the groundwater are below cleanup target levels. There have been arsenic and beryllium, a couple of other heavy metals found early on soil on site, as well as in dust in the old buildings that were demolished. But there's no longer any active monitoring for those. We do believe that off-site soil in the community was under-evaluated, and we will not be surprised if some of the brownfields testing shows heavy metals in off-site soil, and then we have to kind of change our hat from brownfields to ABC to see if that requires any kind of response in the context of ABC.
Okay, good. Glenn, Minnesota 88, is there anything else you wanted to ask or connect with these guys on at the moment?
Hi. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. I was very happy to get the update as what's going on. Certainly, I want to work with this organization in the future. I'll contact Janie after this meeting in the next couple of days and see what we can do as far as providing assistance. I'll admit I have not put this on the front burner for a long time, and it's certainly time to revisit it. And I'll bring it to our board, and we have a meeting coming up next week, and we'll definitely have a follow-up on this.
Great. Thank you, Glenn.
Terrific, thanks. Good. It's one of the good reasons to do this, to get a lot of people talking. Okay, I think I asked all the questions that were in chat. Is there anything else? We got a few minutes left. Anything else anybody wants to bring up at this point or talk further about?
Randy, I just said that I think the dioxin was one of the major pollutants in the Love Canal. I mean, I think the stuff that's going on here is serious stuff. So that's my only, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. And Glenn can comment more on that. But anyway, my heart goes out to you.
Thanks, Dawn.
This is Wanda. I think it's very important that everyone understands how the community is feeling shut in. They're back in the 80s. The county received a grant to protect the community from industrial encroachment and bring in water and sewer, which they really did not complete then. And we're still fighting from 1982, 85 to now to complete that project. Half of the community didn't have a municipal water. The other half didn't have sewer. It was because of the contamination that the other side received water. Until then, we were still on wells. We're still struggling to get sewer on the other side. And the basics of for the grant was to protect the community from industrial encroachment, which has nothing but happened. They received the grant and nothing but industry is coming into the community. How do we survive? How do we revitalize? How do we redevelop? No green space, no nothing. It seems as though we're being boxed in. How do we survive? Where do we go?
I mentioned briefly that I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with that a massive amount of disaster relief funding came into Manatee County, and starting in early 2026, they're going to start doling it out to projects. Although, as Wanda talked about, CDBG funds for infrastructure in Tallevast community came as early as the 80s, the county regularly reallocated funds to do infrastructure in Tallevast into other communities. And then once the contamination was found, never came back to finish that work. So their infrastructure is largely 1980s, 90s infrastructure. So you can imagine when the storms hit, you already have roads, sewer, and stormwater issues. They're compounded when you have the hurricanes. And then you take into account that when you have the hurricanes, the water table rises and commingles with surface water. And we know that even shallow groundwater has some pretty serious chemicals in it. The need for infrastructure in Tallevast is imperative to prevent further exposures. We've put in placeholders for road, sewer, and stormwater work, but of course we can't put those things in. We have to rely on the county to do that. So we are really going to be pushing the county to make sure that they're applying and prioritizing those funds. So we definitely know that that's something that we could use help from people outside of Tallevast, advocating to them that CDBG is directly aimed at low and moderate income communities, and that this is a community that is long past needing infrastructure issues that are created much, much worse because of the disasters. So that's something that as we move forward, we'd like to link you guys more in. But if anybody has success working with various county officials or staff, it's always good to find people that are willing to talk to us as well.
Great. Well, I think that's an area, we'll be talking more, I think, Jeanne, from the league, and then if Minnesota 88 sounds like they'll get involved, and WSLR potentially. It's all good. And to me, I've only been in the area for about 8 years, but this all came up very recently when I became aware of it, and I think it's sort of, even with everything going on, it sort of hasn't been a big focus for a lot of areas. So hopefully we can generate some more focus coming out of this session today. But we'll be talking. Okay. Well, that's it. We got to 6 o'clock, and I appreciate everybody being here. I really want to thank Jeanne and Wanda and Laura. They've got a lot going on, and last week they had the Brownfields meeting, and for them finding time to spend with us is terrific. And if anybody has, I'm sure they'd be happy to make presentations and talk as much as they can to make more people aware of this. So if there's any other groups you're involved with, hope I'm not out of place by saying that they would be willing to do that. So
Absolutely. And the website is here, which I know Randy previously circulated. So there's a lot of information on the Focus website. We launched the website for the first time in 2024. So we're regularly updating it, but it's just amazing to have that in place so that anybody on their own time can go and learn more about what's going on in Tallevast. Don't be duped by the sites that Lockheed has created. Focus on Tallevast is our site. That's where you'll find the accurate information.
Thanks, Jeanne. Okay, with that, good meeting and a lot of good information and we learned a lot today. So thank you everybody for being on here. Any questions, any further follow-up, please let me know and we can address that. Okay, have a good afternoon, or good rest of the day, everybody. Good evening, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're joining the meeting, right, Randy?
Yes, I'm just stopped the recording and now I will end the meeting. Okay.
Thank you, Jeanne.